And I'll quote again, only NRM is allowed to operate in the country such that other political parties, i.e. UPC, DP, CP, and NLP, which existed at that time, will cease to exist as required by the revolution. So it is not that NRM suddenly woke up and started restricting these freedoms. This was the core element of the NRM as they went to the bush. To establish themselves, to entrench themselves, and to continue to dominate the politics of Uganda. Of late, you have had senior officers belittling the institution of the Supreme Court. This is also not something which is out of the blue. In this same document, the power relationship is spelled out very clearly. And this one puts the NRA High Command as the supreme organ. And Parliament, judiciary, and all other institutions are expected to pass and to agree with what the NRA High Command stipulates. So I was not surprised that on Taresita somebody stands up and says the so-called Supreme Court, and we're going to have a High Command meeting. Following the High Command meeting, we now have amendments on the floor of Parliament, which is simply to entrench. But the issue which I want to make very clear, and I want especially those who went to the bush, which include my brother Mugisha Muntu, unfortunately, but also I thank him for putting some of his thoughts in writing, the late John Kazora. There was never an issue of democracy. The core of the NRA was to establish itself, and even the definition of what was to be done was to be defined solely by the NRA High Command. So my issue here is that I'm glad that people are waking up to the reality. This has been the fact since the Bush days. We have been accused of being a dictatorship, well and good. Now, what is taking place in Uganda? As UPC, I can proudly say that the 1980 elections was held under the 1967 constitution without amendment. Without amendment. Each time we come towards the election cycle, we get all sorts of amendments, all sorts of talks of amendments. Of late, we've got a new one coming on the floor of Parliament. And this one touches on the Political Parties and Organizations Act. On this particular issue, I wrote to the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs on the 2nd of April, reminding him that Article or Section 14A of the Political Parties and Organizations Act had never been implemented. And when he raised it as chair of the IPOD Summit at the Colorado Airstrip following the 2021 elections, I will quote, the president said that his party, the NRM, had acted in an un-Christian manner, i.e., they deliberately ignored a provision which would have been beneficial to all parties, and the president described it as un-Christian. What is now trying to be done in Parliament to undermine what was done as an un-Christian manner is completely diabolical, in that they're trying to completely reverse any gains which we had in trying to further this democracy. Now, this letter I wrote to the Minister of Justice. I copied it to the leader of opposition. I copied it to the leader of all political parties, President of NUP, President of FGC, President Jema, and the party president of PPP, the national chairman of NRM, and also the chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission, and I made sure that a copy was also delivered to the Speaker. Yesterday, if people around Parliament, there was something on the order paper on the amendment, but the person who was supposed to be moving that amendment was not even aware that they were supposed to be moving that amendment. The one seconding, Asman Basalra, I got in touch with him, he said he didn't have the facts. Now we have a member of Parliament from Karamoja moving an amendment which touches on IPOD. I have been in IPOD, I have struggled for IPOD, I have worked for IPOD, the first IPOD summit where people said, I chaired it. And we came up with some principles. Those principles were taken up by the Democratic Party when they took over the chair, and they were solidified into a process in which was supposed to be implemented. In the last round of elections, when I brought up the issue, and it was before the committee, in the South Committee room, we were told these things can be sorted out administratively. To date, nothing has been done, but now it's being brought to undermine the very principles upon which we try to build IPOD. I, as a member of UPC, I want to put it categorically clear, such issues will not pass. We shall not accept the undermining of democracy. You see, even in this document, the NRM document, they talk about building a grassroots democracy. The reality of that grassroots democracy is that we have a system which is so overburdened that the government itself has failed to conduct LC1 elections. Each time it keeps being postponed, there's no money. But as a political player, UPC is expected to mirror from the village to the top. That's the grassroots democracy, which even the government of Uganda cannot fund, but political players are expected to fund. Now, the funding which was included in the law, which they have failed or tried deliberately to ignore, they now want to amend before the election cycle, despite where the Supreme Court was very clear on when amendments should take place when we're going towards elections. And therefore, writing this letter was to give them forewarning. Now, the forewarning has turned to undermine the very principles of democracy, and I'm putting them on notice. I, Jimmy Akena, and the Uganda People's Congress will not accept the stage where we have reached. We are going to stand firm on behalf of the people of Uganda, that the people of Uganda can actually play a role in determining their future.